Hello everyone, welcome to Dundas Dashboard How-To Videos. This video will show you how you can create an analytical report from a virtual cube connected to an OLAP data source. The reports are built using the report designer, which I'm going to show you in this video, and once the report is built, you can display them on an analytical dashboard using any of the analytical controls. The analytical dashboards can be created using two processes. One, creating directly from the virtual cube, in which case you're just going to drop the virtual cube on any of the analytical controls on the dashboard. The second method is to create an analytical report first from the cube that gets the data that you need for analysis, and then create the analytical dashboard of that report by dropping the report into one of the analytical controls on the dashboard. The advantage of using a report to create the analytical dashboard is that the report contains a smaller subset of data that you can filter, slice, and dice before creating the dashboard. So from a performance perspective, this results in faster querying of the data on the dashboard versus if you directly create the dashboard from a virtual cube. So the first step in creating an analytical report is to make sure that the virtual cube is set up. So here I have my virtual cube that I have set up. If you're not familiar with how to set up a virtual cube, then make sure that you see the how-to video on how to create the cube, or refer to the support article on our support site. So as you can see, I have my virtual cube set up with the definitions ready. So here I have selected the selected measures that I need and the selected dimensions that I need. I also have a calculated measure in my virtual cube that I created, and I have a date mapping set up. Date mapping is used if you want to filter the cube data on the report or on the dashboard using a calendar control. If you are looking for steps to create either the calculated measure or date mapping, then watch the how-to video on how to set up each one of these, or refer to their support articles on our support site. So once you have your virtual cube set up, then click on its menu button and click on New Report. Give it a name. And once you do that, it opens the report designer that you see on your screen. The report designer lets you build an analytical report by simply dragging the measures, KPIs, or dimensions that you have selected from your virtual cube onto the appropriate sections of the report surface. So for example, if you recall, we selected 3 measures from the virtual cube. One of them is the calculated measure that we set up, and the customer count and the order count, along with the following dimensions. So to create the report, just drag the measures and dimensions that you have selected onto the appropriate section. So for example, I've dragged this measure, and let's say I drag this dimension into the dimension row. So as you can see, this creates a simple report with the dimensions and the measures. If you want to add another measure, just drop the second measure onto the measures section. You can also use the calculated measure that you have set up on your virtual cube. To do that, just drag and drop the calculated measure, and that adds a third column for the calculated measure in your report. If you want to group your data in the report using one of the dimensions, then just drop that dimension onto the grouping section. So let's say you want to group it by geography. Let's drag that, and as you can see, the groups are formed on top of the report. You can also slice or dice the data using the slicer section that you see on top of the report designer. To do this, drag and drop the slicer dimension that you have selected onto this section. For example, let's slice it on state and province. To slice the data, click on the menu button and click on Edit, which will load all the options that are available. You can choose a select view, click on OK, And as you can see, the data has changed accordingly. If you want to filter the data in the report using the dimension that you have selected, then go to the dimension, click on its menu and go to Edit, which will open up all the options. Select the option that you need. And as you can see, the data has been filtered in the report with the selections that you have made in the dimension. You can also filter the groupings by going to the menu button of the group dimension and clicking on the edit button. If you want to have multiple dimensions at the same time, you can also do that. For that, just drop another dimension in the dimension row. So as you can see, the second dimension has been added as another level within the first dimension. If you want to change the order of the dimensions, then just click and drag the dimensions, and as you do that, the report modifies by itself. Similarly, you can also have multiple groupings at the same time. The process is the same. You can just drag and drop another grouping dimension in the grouping section and change the order as you want. Apart from the filtering option in the dimensions, you also have other options, such as you can drill down to another level or drill up to another level. Calendar would be enabled if you are using a date dimension and you have date mapping set up. If you want to change the hierarchy, you can do it from here. Add formula would allow you to use existing formulas such as weighted mean, average, etc. onto your report and analyze the report using those formulas. You can also sort or filter the data according to the conditions that you set up from here. And if you want, you can also make this dimension a read-only dimension. So for example, just to show you how the date mapping works, I have created a date mapping on date.calendar, and if I add this to my dimensions, you can see that the data changes accordingly, and if you go into the menu, you'll see that the calendar is enabled, and I'll be able to filter the data based on the selection that I make. Keep in mind that you can also filter the data using the edit section of the menu, but if you want to give the users the option to use the calendar control to filter the data, then you have to set up date mapping. Similar to the category dimension, the grouping dimensions also have the same properties that you can use to change the data in the report. For the measures, they have the following options. You can edit the measures that you see on the measure screen, or you can add or remove a formula corresponding to a measure. Keep in mind that if you want to add a formula, then you need to make sure that there is no grouping dimension available. Even for dimensions, if you want to add a formula to them, then you have to make sure that there is no grouping dimension available on the report. The slicer, on the other hand, you can change the hierarchy or filter the data or add a formula. Again, you cannot have any grouping dimension if you want to add the formula to a slicer. So far I have shown you how you can drag and drop the dimensions into the categorical grouping or the slicer axis. Apart from this, you also have the option of using a manual or custom MDX query to specify your dimension and its members. To do this, go to the menu button of the dimension section, click on Edit Query, and type in your MDX query into this query text box. An easy way to generate the MDX query is to drag the dimension from the cube tree onto the query text box. For example, I've dragged the product into the query text box, and as you can see, the MDX has been generated automatically. So this queries all the members of the dimension. You can modify this to specify any specific members that you need to be displayed on the report. So once you're set with the MDX query, click on the green check mark to apply the query changes. If you want to remove the query, just go back to the menu section and click on Remove Query, and the report modifies accordingly. In your MDX that you specify, you can also use parameterized queries. For that, you need to set up a query parameter first and then use the parameter in your MDX query. Once you create the query parameter, you can also attach them to the dashboard parameters during the dashboard design stage. In other words, if you want to use a parameter control on your analytical dashboard, you have to first make sure that you set up a query parameter. So to set one up, go to the query parameters section of the report designer and expand it. Click on new parameter and select the parameter type from the drop-down list. In this case, we'll be filtering on a dimension. Give it a name. Here, choose the dimension and define the hierarchy that you want to filter on and click on next. Select the default members of a parameter and set whether you want to allow or disallow multiple value selection. Click on finish. And once you do that, you can see that a query parameter will be displayed in the grid below. Now to insert this parameter into your query text, open the query editor and drag this parameter onto the text editor. Once you do this, the parameter appears in the text editor with the name and DD as its prefix. This is referred to as a parameter token. So the next step is to use this parameter in your MDX query. In this example, I'm just going to use the str2set function to use the parameter. Once you're set with your query, click on the green check mark to apply the query changes. As you can see, the query has been applied and the report has modified with the changes that you have specified in the query. Now when you use this analytical report in your analytical dashboard, then you will be able to use the query parameter and attach it to a dashboard parameter control and filter the data on the dashboard using that control. So the examples that I've shown you so far in this video would let you create the reports. Apart from these, you also have other settings that you can set on the report. These settings are available at the top of the report designer. For example, you can show or hide totals on the categorical and the grouping axis. You can show or hide empty cells on the report. You can set paging on the report. You can also transpose the cell set if you want. And you can also freeze any cell set updates. The options button that you see on the toolbar would let you set the various report options. For example, use the enabled options section to decide which toolbar buttons should appear when the report is viewed by the users from an analytical dashboard. If you want to disable these buttons, just unselect them. So if you want to disable these buttons, just deselect them. The slicer as subquery is an advanced option that lets you include your choices on the slicer axis as a part of the report subquery. The totals that are displayed in the report will be updated to reflect the changes to the subquery. Selecting this option can help improve the performance, but it should be used with the understanding that you may get different results if you use hierarchies from the same dimension. So as you can see, I have disabled these three options from the report options and only allowed these two options to be used by the users in the analytical dashboard. So once you are set with the report, click on Save, and once you save it, check in your virtual cube. This would make sure that the cube and the report are available to be shared amongst the dashboard users. And once you are set with your virtual cube and the analytical report, you are ready to use these to design your analytical dashboard. For example, if I create a new analytical dashboard, you can see that the virtual cube appears under the virtual cube folders, and if you expand the virtual cube, then you can see that the report that you have created appears under it. To use the report to design the dashboard, just click on it and drag it onto the dashboard. By default, the report is used in an analytical combo control. You can also use the individual controls that you see on the toolbox onto the dashboard canvas and drop the report on that. But an analytical combo would let you analyze the report with all your measures, slicers, grouping dimensions, and the categorical dimensions ready, along with the toolbar options that you have selected on the report designer. More information on how to create analytical reports can be found on our support site in the support article shown on your screen. If you have any further questions, feel free to visit our support site at support.dundas.com or contact Dundas Support using the contact information shown on your screen. Thank you for watching.